Hi, I'm Steve from Topiary Art Designs, and this is my guide on how we do topiary. Right, these are the basic tools that I use for everyday topiary. Standard pair of secateurs. These are Nawaki secateurs, N-A-W-A-K-I. It's a Japanese for topiary. These are Nawaki as well. These are hand topiary shears. Very nice for getting in small areas, sharp as razors. Flexi tie. We use flexi tie. It's nice and forgiving when you're trying to train plants and tie them into place. Trusty pair of spear and jackson shears. They're really razor sharp, and they've got lovely ergonomic handles that tend to sit in your hands lovely without trying to fall out. I like those. These are CK shears. It's a German company. I like these for things like yew and tougher materials because they've got this waney edge here which tends to grip the plants as you cut the twigs as you're cutting them, rather than force them out towards the end before cutting. So I like those. They're nice and heavy duty and as hard as it gets. Of course, safety gear, I like to use a visor for when I'm cutting above my head. I tend not to for anything lower than my head, but nevertheless a good tool to have. Single-sided hedge trimmer, hard to get hold of nowadays, but I like this one. There's several reasons why I like it. One is because it's reasonably lightweight, and the other one is because when you're using it or cutting a straight line, you haven't got a cutting edge. I tend to look over the top of the blade like that, and then you haven't got another cutting edge facing your leg, so it's a little bit safer to use. So that's my favourite small hand tool. And of course then the long reach hedge trimmer, which is another one. I get a lovely long swoop with that, so I can get to high points. I can still use it reasonably accurately, and I find I'm using that more and more. If you've got anything higher than over your head and you've got to get to, these are really good tripod ladders. They're from the Nawaki company that are supplying them, and they're great. They've got an adjustable front leg here for different angles, and also this leg can be forced down through a hedge, which brings the entire ladder and everything closer to the hedge for cutting. So they're great, and of course they're stable on any surface. And these I use mostly just a standard pair of steps, standard pair of steps. And most of the topiaries that I like to create, I don't want to go any higher than this if I can help it. Okay, the best plants for topiary in this country is box and yew. You can use other things like privet and lonicera, a few other type things as well, but the best ones for quality and endurance for long lasting are box and yew. Box for smaller items and yew for larger items. Best times to trim. Generally speaking, we're only looking to trim once a year for obvious maintenance reasons. So the time to trim box wood would be mid-June. The saying goes, trim your box on Derby Day, which is mid-June. The reason for that is it's done the majority of its growing by then, and so when you do clip it, it doesn't all sprout out again before the end of the summer, and then you've got to re-clip it again. Yew is a bit later coming, and it grows at 8 to 10 inches a year. These ones weren't cut last year as they should have been, but the best time to cut this, generally speaking, would be September, October time, when it's done the majority of its growing, and you can clip it and it will look wonderful all winter. The reason that most of these topiaries are this kind of height is because we want to avoid using ladders at all costs if you're the one that is doing the maintenance. There's something very grand about something big. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you're the one that's got to maintain it, I would avoid going any higher than you can get to on a basic platform with a hedge trimmer. What I'm going to advise you now is, if you're growing topiaries for yourself, avoid using things like ladders. So even though there's something grand in large scale items, if you're the one that's got to maintain it, you don't want to be standing on the top of a set of steps with a long reach hedge trimmer trying to cut over the top of something. It's dangerous, and accidents do happen. Basically, when we start trimming topiary, I use what I call the 2-pass system, which is basically cutting it twice. But the first time we cut it, we roughly cut over the top, just taking off all this excess wispy growth without actually worrying about the shape too much. Once you've cut off all this wispy growth, you can stand back and look at it, and it will expose the shape to you better underneath. And then the second pass with the hedge cutter is where you do your cutting back hard shaping. But the first one is just to expose that initial shape. Makes it easier. Cutting a box ball or a topiary ball, there's a technique to it, and people usually think that it's quite simple to cut a ball, and actually it is, but you tend to end up, if you don't do it in the correct order, you end up with a squat ball, and that's not so good. If you cut the top first, for example, you'll end up with a squat ball. And so basically what we do is we go around the outside all the way first, creating more like a cylinder. And this also applies to the first time you're trying to shape a ball out of a standard plant that's not even roughly ball shaped yet. You go around the outside, create a cylinder, and then once you've created your cylinder, you transfer the width of that cylinder to the height, because obviously a ball is symmetrical both ways, and whatever height that ball, or however wide that ball is, transfer it to the height, and then chop your top so that you know where the top of your ball is. So you've now got a cylinder the same width as the height of it. Then you go around the outside, lightly rounding over, lightly rounding over, lightly rounding over, all the way around until you get a nice roundy top, lightly clipping to the middle there without clipping down any deeper than you've initially cut off. Then we go back around and do the same thing on the underneath, lightly clipping in, lightly clipping in, and lightly clipping in, and so it makes it look like it's sitting on the ground. I'll show you. Cutting long straight lines. I personally like to use the long reach hedge trimmer. On large areas it's totally fine, and if you're careful with it, it can be quite accurate. You're using it like a knife or like a like a sculpting tool really, but I like it because it gives me a little bit of distance from the hedge or the topiary, and enables me to see my lines a bit better. So I can stand here and I can take the edge off of that and get a nice crisp edge, and making sure that the edge is upright and creating the effect that you want it to. Remove any of the excess dead from the top. It'll only turn brown and look bad on the plant, so get what you can off. It's not imperative every little bit, but it does help. Finish off with the clippers. Usually you get the odd one pop up as you brush the top, so it's good to finish off with the clippers. There, I think done for the year. Here we are with the Pied Piper of Hamelin being followed by a line of children, which we started to create about 20 years ago now. We used frames to grow the single plant inside, and as you can see it's looking very dense and there's virtually no frame showing anymore. It becomes harder and harder to actually cut back to the frame because it gets so dense, but it's looking stunning. And we clip it once a year usually with a pair of shears, so you can get back to all the detail and get the nice crisp lines again. Time is always of the essence when doing a lot of topiary or a lot of work in the garden anyway, so I tend to like to use power tools whenever I can, and there's a reason I talked about earlier. I like a single reach hedge trimmer. The reason for that is, if I was cutting on here normally, I wouldn't be able to cut against it like that through fear of chopping off that middle branch there. For obvious reasons, so you would end up tending to use hand shears on here, which takes time and effort, a lot of effort. Whereas if you've got a single-sided blade, you can push that single-sided blade against the tree and cut away from it each time. I'll show you. Okay. Bolt done. Give it a bit of a clear off, and then finish up with hand shears, paying particular attention to the edges because that's what makes them look crisp. Done. Onto the sides. Cutting basic box hedges, fairly straightforward. I like the single sided hedge trimmer again, and basically because I like to look over the top and look down on the blade, and a little tip here is, rather than have the blade running flat to the hedge like that, tip it in slightly. They tend to cut better, it cuts neater, and then you can walk along keeping that vertical all the way as you go, and they cut nice and clean. The tops of them, generally speaking, if the ground is not reasonably level, you can tuck it in, find your level that you want it to be, tilt the blade down slightly again and tuck it into your leg, fixing it basically to the same place on your leg, and stiffen your arms to allow you to keep that nice and straight. Then as you walk along it, hopefully you can keep a very neat straight top going, rather than up and down and undulating and it getting away from you. If you'd like to see any of our latest projects, just go to www.topiaryartdesigns.com.